Hello and welcome to Normal Islands Live. I'm Curtis Daly, and you know what? I'm really excited for tonight's show because I am joined by co-host of North Star Politics, Noah East. Noah, how are you?
My absolute pleasure to be here, Curtis. I'm very excited. I'm absolutely loving the vibes already in pre-production, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. Calling in from the leafy London suburb of Brixton.
I mean, this is the crossover of the ages. I mean, I was saying to you backstage, we already had a comment saying, "Oh, we got Noah from North Star Politics," so the crossovers is going to continue, I'm sure. But I'm very happy you're here. It's going to be a fantastic show. Your analysis is going to be incredible. We know this.
Let's get into it. We bow to turn left. We're very new to the game, North Star Politics. But yeah, looking forward to this as being the first of many collaborations.
Oh, 100%. Okay, this is what we've got coming up on tonight's show. We'll be discussing the potential Labour to Green Party defectors, that's MPs, reform seemingly trying to bribe voters, and GB News guest claimed that white people are facing genocide. You can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. On to our first story. A Green Party leader, Zach Polansky, has held talks with several Labour MPs who may defect from the party. One Labour MP questioned about a possible defection was also collared by, and I'm assuming that means like grabbed at the collar, by a cabinet minister who accused them of being in contact with Polansky, according to a report in the Times. The MP said they were not planning to defect, but that Labour's humiliating defeat in the Gorton and Denton by-election showed Keir Starmer's party had lost its core votes. The MPs regularly speak with Polansky about news and policy, as well as amendments to legislation passing through Parliament, the Times said. A senior Labour source said the government was not concerned about potential defections to the Greens. Polansky has said before that he has spoken to Labour MPs who would prefer to be in his party, but don't feel it's a good idea to defect. When I talk to them, they say to me, they know they'd be happier in the Green Party, but for them, it's not an emotional, it's not an emotional decision right now. It's a strategic decision, and the strategic decision is that they have more power to influence things from within the Labour Party. Now, I actually doubt that. I think they would have more influence in the Greens than Labour. We've seen when the left or the centre-left figures try and make change in Labour, they get kicked out. I mean, if you vote against the two-child benefit cap, you're gone. Now, a Green Party source said this. We are fully focused on winning as many seats as we can in the May elections. If more Labour MPs can now see the Greens as the party which most represent their values and are best placed to beat reform, then of course we can have discussions with them. But we've made it clear that we do not consider Starmer's Labour a progressive party. Now, the interesting question is who? I mean, some have floated Clive Lewis as a potential defector, as well as Nadia Whittome. Noah, I mean, do you think this is a good idea for the Greens? I mean, Reform has suffered with the litany of Tory defections. And, you know, the Greens, will they have the same issue and potentially lose their sort of anti-establishment credentials, if you will?
I think, especially as a left-wing party, we've seen with your party how important it is to frame oneself correctly in the right-wing press media. And where we've seen your party perhaps fall foul to disorganisation, what we wouldn't want to see is the Greens fall foul to becoming an establishment figure, such as Reform has done. I think what's important for Zach Polansky and the Green Party top brass to think about here is how much consistency is there with an entrant MP defecting from Labour with Green Party principles? Will they just come across as hypocrites? Will they come across as purely strategic? And will they come across as that classic career politician that the Green Party would like to rid themselves of? I think Clive Lewis is an interesting example because he just seems desperate to get out. You know, if you remember a few months ago, he was saying he would happily stand down from his constituency if it meant Andy Burnham could take up a position in Parliament. So I think there are maybe those long-time Labour loyalists who are still part of a party they no longer see as their own. But of that sort of 2024 class who are maybe just looking for their safest seat possible, I think we should be a bit more sceptical about their intentions.
Interesting about Clive Lewis. And I was reading, this is Twitter gossip, but I was reading on Twitter that he's very unpopular in Norwich with people on the ground, actually. And the Greens have a good chance of beating Labour in that seat. So why would you want that? Also, I mean, there were discussions with Clive Lewis. People were saying, does he want to leave the Labour Party? But then you also set up that group called Mainstream, which is like a soft left version of Momentum. I mean, all these groups within the Labour Party seem so pointless to me. I mean, from where I'm standing, I think it would be a bad idea, because I think when Zat first became leader, they were talking about potential defections there. The scope of Green Party success was push Labour to the left, 30, 40 seats. And now Zach's saying, we want to replace Labour. I mean, they're polling 20, 21%. They're polling above Labour. So in my eyes, maybe they don't want to bring on some ex-Labour MPs, because they're like, do you know what? We want to be the dominant force. And again, I mean, I think the Reform Party have suffered in the polling when you've got people like Robert Jenrick who's saying, you know, we need to fix Britain. And they're like, you are part of the problem. So how can you fix Britain? Maybe people might go, hold on a second, I'm voting for the Greens, not Labour. I don't like these Labour MPs. So let's say 3 or 4 MPs jump ship to the Greens. I'm not sure if that's even going to happen, but let's say that happens. Do you think, on balance, it could be worse for the Green Party? Because people will feel like, we left Labour to vote for the Greens. We don't want to be associated with this lot.
I think I agree with you on 2 points there. I think one, Zach Polanski shouldn't become too attracted by these great set-piece moments of a defection. I know they are really enticing, especially for not one of the main duopoly parties. It is really important to get in the media headlines, but I don't think you should be too attracted to that. The second point is what you're really looking at there from the outside in, as a voter, even myself, as someone who's a fan of the Green Party, not necessarily a member. I'm thinking, oh, so if we allow a defection from a Labour Party, what we're essentially saying there is some level of coherence between 2024 Labour manifesto and current Green Party policy. And I think, considering Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers ever, that's something that the Green Parties want to stay far clear of, trying to sort of giving this image that there's any sort of consistency between those two portfolios of principles.
I think there's such a small amount of Labour MPs. Again, I'm not a Green Party member either. I guess I'm on the outside. But if I was a Green Party member, there'd be such a small amount of MPs I'd accept.
Yeah, I was going to say, we actually don't want losers. Is a big part of it. Like, there's a very unpopular batch of MPs, a very new batch of MPs with not much parliamentary credentials or experience. Are these really the kind of people who want to have decorate the halls of a Green Party government, potentially?
Yeah, you've got people like Carl Turner who said, I'm really, really against the shutting down of juries. And then he voted for it. That's the thing. Like, there's a bunch of people in the Labour Party who may say the right thing, but push comes to shove, they're pretty bad. I mean, maybe, in my view, Nadia Whittome is probably the only person I'd accept. But
no, I do like Nadia
Whittome.
I think also if part of the Green Party's policies is trying to promote this sort of deliberative democracy and sort of inclusive way of debating within a parliamentary party. I think what we've seen from a lot of the Labour class, especially the younger generation of new Labour candidates or first-time Labour MPs, is a level of sycophancy to the NEC that is just not consistent with the kind of deliberative, vivacious democracy that we'd want in a parliamentary party.
Yeah, we know about Labour students. They are an awful bunch of people. But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're pretty much on the same wavelength here. But it's interesting to see, and we're going to see what happens. But let's go on to our next story. We'll talk about Reform. The Reform Party, of course. We can't not speak about them, can we? Now, did Reform just to try... Excuse me, I'll start that from the top. Did Reform just try to bribe voters? In their latest stunt, the party decided to take over a petrol station in Derbyshire, kit it out with their brand, and have been subsidising fuel prices for those that used that particular petrol station.
So we didn't know what we were expecting when we were told to come here to Derbyshire, but this is a Reform refuel petrol station, and for one day only, they're cutting fuel prices 25 pence off. You see it there, one day only. Why are they doing it? Because their policy is to try and find savings in the net zero budget in order to fund a cut at the pumps come September. So this is the publicity around it, and I imagine there'll be a lot of people coming here today to refuel their cars.
I mean, the really grotesque thing about this is Reform have been the biggest champions of war in Iran, right? They've attacked Keir Starmer for not being aggressive enough. And as we all know, the longer the war drags on, the bigger the pressure people will face when it comes to bills as oil prices will increase. Yet despite reform being all out in favour of the war, which, as I said, right, and it's going to lead to, as Grace Blakely coined, warflation. I think it's a really good term, actually. They're now pulling this stunt to attack green energy. And the question is, I mean, is this legal? Now, I haven't found any information in regards to this, whether it is legal or broken the law. But to me, this is a bribe and should not be allowed. And it's clear the party have realised they are completely out of touch when it comes to this war. I mean, despite being the loudest voices in supporting it, the majority of people are opposed to it, which led to this completely cynical tweet from Robert Jenrick, now trying to pretend the party isn't pro-war. Here is some of what he said. The Iranian regime is wicked, but this war needs to come to an end as soon as possible because it is making Britain poorer. Reform are a party for working people, not drawn-out wars in faraway places. That's why Nigel Farage immediately ruled out suggestions that the UK might deploy boots on the ground, nor do we see why British aircraft should become involved in offensive action. In just a matter of days, people are feeling the side effects of the conflict. The cost of filling up your car or van has already risen sharply. Those who rely on heating oil to heat their homes are feeling the pinch, and very soon, household prices will rise more sharply. The fact is that the longer this war continues, the more damage it will cause to British families, businesses, and manufacturers. If those egging on British military involvement in Iran were as eager to secure our borders, we will be a much safer country. At a time when our country is broken and in need of serious repair, we do not need distractions. Our sole interest must always be in making the British people safer and more prosperous. There is no time to waste. And I'm just saying, what an utter lying toe rag. It's so brazen. Of course, the people are not stupid and can see this is a complete U-turn, right? We've got the receipts. This is Deputy Leader Richard Tice saying he's willing to be a complete cuck to Israel and the US.
Would you be seeing the RAF bomb Iran?
We would be helping the Americans and the Israelis in any way they saw appropriate, because this is a strategic, permanent threat to all of our safety and interests. And look, obviously, the Americans have the greatest military resources. We all know that. But if requests were made, we would have been saying, yes, we're pleased to help.
Literally, I mean, whatever Israel and America does, Reform are like, yeah, sign us up, daddy. So you're not fooling me anyway, Mr. Generic. And good luck trying to convince anyone else you're against the war. Noah, I want to get your reaction to this. I mean, in terms of the branding on the petrol station, offering literally cheaper fuel, this feels like it should be illegal. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I don't know if Reform are intentionally trying to invoke sort of the mid-20th century Black Panther Party in the US, or the Brazilian Workers' Party with their cariñosos and this sort of community outreach. But in a way, it does kind of come from that tradition of sort of public spectacle. But I guess the sort of underlying substance of what they're doing is somewhat cynical. I wanted to touch on that. I actually just grabbed my handy notebook where I take notes here and there throughout the day about something I took down a few days ago about why does it feel like, and I'm sure a lot of people in the chat will realize, like, Reform is just every day in the headlines for one reason or another, but yet there seems to be no accountability. There's such a clear public record of this hypocrisy, as you've just seen with Richard Tice there, but yet it doesn't seem to carry any weight. And I think a lot of this is driven by that dichotomy between, or that difference between legacy media and media outlets such as Turn Left or North Star Politics. And it's that people in the chat to this evening, and Curtis and Sarah, actually fundamentally care and really do keep account of what Richard Tice is doing, what Reform are doing, what Suella Braverman did last week versus this week, what Clive Lewis was doing last week versus this week. Whereas a lot of the mainstream media and their sort of paymasters only really care about making news on a day-to-day basis. Therefore, in a similar way to, we might say, Elon Musk's X or any sort of social media platform, you're only as good as your last clip. And therefore, it doesn't matter if your last clip was totally in contradiction to your current clip, as we've seen with Richard Tice there, as long as it makes those headlines.
I think it's a really good point you made there, actually, in terms of like community outreach and political parties doing something for people. In a way, yes. I mean, look, I would like to see the Green Party do local food banks or campaigning on that and actually helping people out. I mean, I'm sure that it happens in some local parties, right? in a way, yes, I completely understand that. But obviously, on the other hand, I think we all know that this is a complete cynical approach. I mean, these guys are not reducing fuel for that one day because they care about people's fuel prices, because again, they were the ones championing this war. But their solution as well, they were saying, this is why we can't have net super zero. This is why we can't have green energy. And it's like, you do realize that green energy is cheaper. We need more abundant energy. Oil is scarce and it's only going to get, less in supply when it comes to war, which is why we have the so-called warflation. Let's talk about polling, right? There's been a series of polls that have shown Reform are slipping. I think people are taking notice that Reform are slightly losing support. Do you think Reform have made a series of errors over the past few months? And do you think they're now realising their mistake? Again, maybe Robert Jenrick saying, like, we're actually against this war. We didn't support boots on the ground. Again, cynical. But do you think they're kind of understanding that maybe they are losing support? Or do you actually disagree? Maybe they're not losing support whatsoever and it's just polls saying certain things.
I mean, and I say it a lot of times on our podcast, is like, I am such a polling cynic.
Yeah,
maybe it's just purely, I'm just, the vibes don't sit right with me, but I'm just so skeptical of polling. But I do think, obviously, when we look at the Gorton and Denton by-election, the big thing that Reform was trying to get across after their loss was that if we saw a proportional swing throughout the country at the next general election, then it would be a Reform landslide. So I do think there has been some systematic errors in strategy from Reform. One being throwing their lot in with Donald Trump. We've seen Donald Trump isn't particularly popular in the United States. When we see maybe the midterms later this year, it might really come to bear that Reform have picked or backed the wrong horse in terms of that. But I also think the defections, as we spoke about with the first story, have kind of undercut that radical image that Reform had as being the rejection vote or the total resentment vote. So I think those two strategic failures really are sort of coming to pass as they settle into the middle pack. They're no longer like a front runner. They're now sort of seen as more homogenous with the current political elite, and therefore that's kind of bearing out in the polling.
Do you know, I completely understand that you're cynical polling, and maybe I talk about them too much. I get quite excited in polls, and maybe I shouldn't do that because honestly, we have no idea, do we, in reality? But let's talk about vibe, as you just sort of said then. The vibe does ring true to me, though, that Reform have lost their edge in terms of, I mean, the Gorton and Denton by-election is a really good example because the way they responded to it wasn't to say, look, we lost this time, however, we made gains in terms of the vote share. They were crying like babies. They were whinging. Matt Goodwin is still talking about the Gorton and Denton by-election. Nigel Farage on his own platform on GB News was basically talking about voter fraud as if there was any voter fraud happening. There's been no real evidence to suggest that. And they've been moaning and moaning and moaning. And people don't like whiners. People don't like sore losers. So it feels like in that way, they have lost their edge. And I've definitely seen a shift when it came to the end of last year. Nigel Farage was basically saying, we're not going to do, or we can't do tax cuts maybe in the first couple of years of Parliament because the Conservatives have screwed up the economy. And they basically embraced austerity. Their U-turn on the two-child benefit cap. They could have went for a more natalist approach, a civic nationalist approach, which is, we can spend on welfare, we just want to cap immigration. Now I feel like they're really moving into austerity. There's nothing particularly popular about them. And of course, then the litany of defections. So again, polling aside, does it feel like there is a vibe shift happening in which, if you asked me 3 months ago, I was certain it was going to be a Reform majority next election. I appreciate political predictions are the worst, but is there something to that?
I mean, I know, Curtis, I like a political prediction.
You do? Wow.
Yeah, on the podcast a few weeks ago, we predicted the new Nepalese prime minister, the new rapping Nepalese prime minister. But in this instance, I think there's another example of following the Trump playbook, but it perhaps not being entirely suited for a British populace. The whole questioning the voting in Gorton Denton is classic January 6th Trumpism. I think for me, the first sign that Reform might not be as adept a political operating system as we might have expected was the actual selection of Matt Goodwin. This idea that they could superimpose a Deus Ex Machina figure onto the electorate in Gorton and Denton and that just be totally okay is kind of linked to this dominance in mainstream media that Reform's seen. They see themselves as a national party rather than a collection of local institutions, and therefore they've tried to impose that as an electoral strategy, and it started to come apart at the seams. They've got time to fix that. They've got time to amend that. I think we've also seen, you've probably seen minor headlines here and there of different Reform councillors who have been elected to the council in different different wards than defecting because they said there's been no sort of internal support or structural support for me as a councillor. So I think they have got a few years to work on that, but I think that has been the biggest sign for me that perhaps they aren't the smooth operating system we might have expected.
Yeah, and I think it's just the money, spending money on flashy things is made people feel like, oh, they're a real slick operation. I mean, you look at their press conferences, they're very good looking, very high production values, but of course they've got the money to back it up. But internally, where the political machinations actually matter, they have nothing. But I suppose, again, I mean, I'm being biased because I'm on the left, but it's a group of cynical people who don't really care about changing things for the better. I'm not surprised they don't have smooth political operations. But your analysis is very good there. Find your word in this one.
You know, it's also important to think about political parties as institutions to produce talent. And we've seen the problems with talent production in the Labour Party. Obviously, we saw it year after year with the Conservative premiership passing hands. And I think it's yet to be seen whether reform, especially with its corporate structure as being literally the most pyramidic strict structure possible, has the ability to produce talented political operators. And with the example of Matt Goodwin, clearly not yet.
Well, that's the thing. I'm glad you brought the Labour Party because it's just sort of corporate MP after corporate MP. And if you're disappointed with the talent of the Labour MPs, then it's only going to be worse under reform. Because in a way, like, Nigel Farage is the only figure who's in any way interesting. But all the rest of them are just men in suits because, again, there is no internal sort of machinery to actually try and breed half-decent candidates. It's basically Nigel Farage's show. We'll get anyone in. They're just going to vote for the reform banner and that's it. Maybe they're wrong. Excellent stuff. They're really interesting about the internal machinations, actually. I thought it was a really important contribution. Before we move on to our next story, you know what I'm going to say? It's 2026 and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be far more ambitious than last year and to really put us on the map. We've been trying to do more things. I mean, I was in Amsterdam this weekend actually doing a report, but we can do that more often. Of course, we would love to have a studio and for our contributors to be paid for the work we do. Your support over the years has been incredible, and we are ready to take this to the next level. We, of course, rely on small donations. So if you want to be part of a media organization that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. Of course, you can also become a YouTube member for 99p. But on to our final story. Thomas Corbett Dillon went on GB News and claims there is a white genocide.
Such as GB News, I'm sure. And, you know, I think it's so funny that they seem to think that GB News is this extremist channel. I'm like, I'd love for them to turn on Fox News once in a while and see what actually, you know, so you want to hear some extremist views. You're not getting them on GB News. GB News is actually really, really impartial and really good about this. But, yeah, I mean, it's why are these people coming? Why do we have to listen to them? And they're the ones that say, you know, social cohesion, it's going to be probably attacking the right wing in the country. It's similar to what happened in Germany, where they've basically banned all the right-wing parties and you can't support them. I'm sure they'll be going after the Restore Party. I'm sure Reform will get some attacks too. So, yeah, I think you're right. And it is interesting in America, as you say, they don't really have as many isolated communities. You know, in Birmingham in England, you've got the Muslims that basically just live in there. They all speak the same language. They live in their own little world. You don't really get that in America. When people move to this country, they tend to integrate pretty well. You kind of embrace America. There's not been much embracing of British values among these communities. And I hate this idea that England is just like a no man's land. It's like, no, there is an indigenous population that have lived on that island for thousands of years. And, you know, if this was happening in any other place around the world, everyone would be defending and saying, wow, there's a genocide happening in this island because it is being taken over by different people that are not indigenous to that land. And I think that's a sad thing to happen. So I think...
genocide, is that a bit of a harsh word? I mean, white Brits are still the majority in the UK.
Yeah, currently, give it 10 years, give it 20 years. I mean, yes, if this was happening, if there was an island of indigenous people in, you know, the Pacific, and all of a sudden a bunch of white people moved there and were having babies, and the #1 name in that country became Tom, all of a sudden the UN would be there and saying, this is outrageous, that's an indigenous island, those people have rights. But do it to England and no one seems to care. I think that's a real shame.
Well, there was some reports, I can't remember where from the top of my head, but there was a report saying that I think white Brits would be a minority in the next 50 years or so. Paul Cox, Shadow Community.
I mean, we're just being gaslighted. Are you insane? There's so much to unpack there. Corbett Dillon saying, first of all, you know, GB News isn't an extreme channel. then goes on to say that white people are facing a genocide with very little pushback. I mean, the new pushback he got from the host, Ben, I can't remember his last name actually, he says, well, you know, is the word genocide a bit harsh? It's absolutely insane. Now, by the way, when he talks about how, well, what if, you know, we as white people went to other countries and started taking over, we'd be outraged. That's been happening for hundreds of years, potentially thousands of years, right? I mean, what about the British Empire? What about colonialism? Did you just forget about all of that? This is insane. And of course, saying that GB News is impartial. Christ, I nearly fell off my seat hearing that. I mean, look, we are biased. We are not impartial. We are literally called Turn Left. We are a media of socialists. But we admit that. We say, yeah, we are on the left. But also, we don't lie about our stuff. You've got a guy saying GB News is impartial. That's crazy. I mean, you guys have seen me try and debate Nana Aquia. She don't let you get in a word edgeways. Just absolutely insane. Now, Corbett Dillon is peddling the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, which is the idea that people are orchestrating a takeover of white people and replacing them with brown and black people. Now, this is an old and extremely anti-Semitic argument in which Jewish people were the ones behind the replacement. Great Replacement, also known as white replacement theory or white genocide theory, claims there is an intentional effort led by Jews to promote mass non-white immigration, interracial marriage, and other efforts that would lead to the extinction of whites. This conspiracy theory was famously promoted at the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville when white supremacists chanted, "Jews will not replace us," while a similar conspiracy theory was prevalent in Nazi Germany and has been promoted by white nationalists for decades. So this is literally a Nazi talking point that's being promoted on GB News. Now look, I agree there is a lack of debate in this country. You put on BBC, ITV, whatever it is, and the confines of the debate is between the opposition leader and the Prime Minister. If the opposition leader and the Prime Minister agree on war, then the debate is how much war do we do? If the opposition leader and the Prime Minister agree on austerity, the debate is how much austerity shall we do? Absolutely, the debate is so narrow. So I agree with debate and stuff, right? And of course, this country has huge issues with censorship. I mean, namely, arresting people for holding signs. But we have to draw the line somewhere. And for me, right, it's Nazi conspiracy theories. Wow, what a radical I am. Now, whilst this is being discussed, GB News contributors continue to ignore the real genocide in Palestine. Now, look, I have no issue with people debating and discussing immigration. And yes, ethnic demographic changes are happening. There are less white people as a percentage in this country than there were 50 years ago. Albeit, white people are still a massive majority. But to claim there is a genocide, all right, this is truly dangerous, where GB News are again mainstreaming Nazi talking points. And by the way, who cares? What does someone's skin color matter, right? And the thing is, we have gone from talking about being concerned about illegal immigration to whites are being replaced at breakneck speeds. Okay, this isn't a 20, 30 year project. This has been 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have heard Keir Starmer say, you know, we're a nation of strangers or an island of strangers. You couldn't think of it. It'd be unfathomable. I mean, the talking points and policies of the BNP, which you couldn't say 5, 10 years ago, are being adopted by the Labour Party. And now we've got people going on GB News, on TV, saying that white people are facing genocide. Also, Corbett Dillon, and it says on GB News, he was a former advisor to Boris Johnson. He claims he's a former advisor to Boris Johnson. In reality, he worked for Westminster Digital, who provided videos of Johnson's leadership campaign. So he didn't actually work for him. A really weird thing to lie about. Noah, those who are and were obsessed about illegal immigration, in my view, weren't really talking about illegal immigration. This is the actual discussion they wanted to have. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do, and I think the big admission that needs to be offered by Keir Starmer when he talks about a nation of strangers and Corbett Dillon here is that fundamentally liberal democracy was never set up for people that weren't white. And if we look at some of like the philosophical scholarship of people like Charles Mills, when he looks at the racial contract, we see the ability to unpack a lot of this liberal ideology around the preservation of private rights, but that doesn't apply to people if they are not of your same creed and culture. If people want to host themselves in communion with other people that follow the same creed, let's say in a mosque, that's entirely consistent and coherent with liberal politics. But for people who are sort of see the connotations of liberal democracy as being purely for white people, that suddenly becomes an affront to the society as they see it. I was thinking, you rightly alluded to it, it's really important we unpack what's going on here with the linguistics. I think, and maybe this is a bit conspiratorial of me, there's a concerted effort among, let's say, the centrist media and right-wing politics to undermine certain things in the Overton window, let's say, such as a genocide. To refer to this as a genocide, to just refer to sort of a medium level of immigration to one of the most multicultural societies or countries in the world that has benefited a lot from globalization as a genocide, is to undermine, like you said, the real genocide going on in Palestine, the real war crimes going on in Sudan, the real genocide going on in Sudan, the real systematic genocide that's coming as a downstream of that same globalization in the Congo. And, you know, like I say, maybe it's conspiratorial of me to say that there's a concerted effort to undermine this, but there's exactly what is coming from that.
And I saw, of course, the host was talking about how, okay, maybe genocide's a bit too strong, but, you know, white people will become a minority by 2066. I mean, that was the figure that was also pushed by far-right political parties and accounts, right? And it may be true that, yes, like, white people won't be the majority. They're going to be the plurality, right? But what I find incredibly ironic and funny is that the right wing have adopted sort of the inverse of liberal identity politics, insofar that the right wing used to say, we care about you as a person, your personality matters, your skin color doesn't matter. And the problem with the left is they're so obsessed with identity that I must speak over you because I'm a person of color, for example, and me being a person of color or religion, that's part of my identity. And the right wing really reject that. And to be honest, like, that was quite appealing to a lot of people who weren't, you know, into critical race theory or understood the nuances when it came to race, religion in terms of society, right? Your average person who doesn't really care about politics, that makes sense. They'd be like, I don't care what kind of skin you are, the person matters. That is what the right wing used to say. And now they've done this inverse liberal identity politics, which is actually race and religion and culture. That's the only thing that matters. And they're now talking about it now. They're saying, oh my God, white people are going to be a minority. But where were you? Hold on a second. You were disagreeing with yourself 5 years ago and you said you didn't care about skin color. What do you think's happening here? Do you think that, once again, those that pretended to say, oh, it doesn't matter what color skin you are as the person, right? That was also a cover for this kind of politics. And they just waited and waited to see that it was going to become more, I don't know, probably they were allowed to say this, you know. It became easier for them to say it's in the mainstream.
Yeah. I think it's become more intellectualized, is the way I describe it. Is, you know, there's racism quite flagrantly, and racism at its root is an emotional response to someone you've othered. And what I'd say is, you know, many people understand maybe in the chat today, is that it's very much an arbitrary thing. So, for example, one of the things that Corbett Dillon said there was that there has been there's an indigenous population for thousands of years. But in fact, you know, there was a great documentary back in the day called Who Owns Britain? And the highest correlation chance of you being a significant landowner in the British Isles is whether your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, 27 times removed, was a friend of William the Conqueror. So, you know, these are arbitrary delineators we make between one group and another, depending on an emotional response. At one point, it was Normans coming over here. Another point, it was Huguenots. Another point, it was Jewish people fleeing pogroms. And depending on whatever visceral reaction you have to them, you might display that in terms of explicit racism. But as it sort of becomes more normalized, it becomes an intellectualized approach to othering. And that's what we're seeing here. Is it's become part of common parlance. There's been a framework set out by a lot of scholarship. Matt Goodwin was part of that scholarship to sort of express that emotion.
Interesting with Matt Goodwin, because he did that shit. He was sort of like a centrist, centre-right figure doing research on the far right and fascists, and he became one. But it's really interesting. I mean, do you think then that Restore, the party Restore, are they having an impact? I mean, we're seeing these kind of discussions now. We had a member from Restore go on Talk TV with Alex Phillips saying, basically, you're not British if you're not a Christian, which the irony there is if you trace back Christianity, it's from the Middle East, not in the West or Eurocentric. So it's like, where do you draw the line there? But yeah, there's a fundamental conversation happening about race and culture. Do you think, whilst I don't think Restore electorally can have any success, do you think this as a party is pushing this conversation, or do you think it's something more wider than this particular party by Rupert Lowe?
I think that maybe like it's becoming quite normalized now that your politics no longer needs to appeal to a principle or to an ideal, but more become an expression of a feeling. And so when we see that kind of argument from Restore that if you're not white, you're not British, they're actually not. The veil has dropped, and they're not appealing to some sort of theoretical framework that we might have seen with New Labour or even the Thatcher years. We're appealing to an economic framework of Hayek that we need to pursue these sorts of policies. No. Disregard any frameworks. We're going to build from the ground up based on my instinctual feeling that I have for society and how I want society to be, and we're going to build from there. And in some ways, that can be quite constructive and sort of radical. But in this instance, when driven by that revolting racism and xenophobia, it is very dangerous. If that becomes like a normalized way of interacting with politics, and we're not appealing to ideals, we're not appealing to principles, we're just espousing our emotions, we're just espousing our sort of our most base feelings.
Yeah, and the irony that has been leveled at the left is that they're the snowflakes, we're the overly emotional ones. But actually, I call them the woke right. Some people hate it when I say that, but I want to sort of emphasize that it's the right wing who are the ones who are so emotional, and they're the ones that are obsessed about identity, yet they've got nothing to say on class, nothing to say on inequality, etc., etc. Really good stuff. Do you want to finish off?
I think also maybe just as a tool for everyone is like my thing that I've been banging on about for years now when we have these arguments about who is British and who isn't. If someone really wants to get, take a stand and start saying who isn't British, I just want just a brief outline of what is Britishness then.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then, you by all means go ahead and state your case. But until we get a proper outline from GB News, Restore Britain, Reform UK and these sorts of institutions of what Britishness is, then I don't want to hear this sort of haphazard, offhand dismissal of someone's identity.
But you know what, actually, it's not just the right winger at fault, it's the Liberals. I can't remember the Labour MP's name. He pinned an article about what it is to be British, or Matt Goodwin isn't really British. And you do hear from Liberals, Labour MPs, whatever, centrists who say, this person isn't, this far-right activist isn't really British because they don't care about democracy. You hear it a lot when it comes to America. They say, what Donald Trump is doing is so un-American, which I don't think that's really a basis in reality. I mean, there's lots of things he's doing which is American, which is appalling, but very American. And the problem is, when you've got both sides doing it, that's a very dangerous thing. When you're saying, the right wing says, you've got to be a Christian, you've got to believe in these fundamental values, and essentially a lot of people think you've got to be white to be British. And then you've got liberals saying, well, if you don't believe in rule of law or democracy, you're not really British. I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, it is as simple as just having a bit of paper. You're a British citizen, and I'd rather have that conversation there than open up, even in a well-meaning way, when liberals say, look, you should care about people and things and institutions. That's what Britain really is. Well-meaning maybe, but also I think it's incredibly dangerous because you're opening up that Pandora's box in which you were once considered British for believing this particular thing, and 10 years later you may believe the same thing, but you're now no longer British.
Yeah, I think, and it was Jeevan Sander who wrote that article saying that Matt Goodwin I'm more British than Matt Goodwin or something along those lines. And no, I agree with you that I think those archaic, somewhat Weberian or Westphalian ideas of statehood that you're either state by blood or state by birth are starting to fray at the seams, especially in the wake of globalization. That's really been sort of the final domino to fall in pushing that Westphalian idea of a state to its boundaries. When it comes to this idea of Britishness, I agree with you in the sense that it isn't particularly good to use it as a political football, but I would encourage people at home to look into the implications of the Shamima Begum case. Shamima Begum was the Bethnal Green schoolgirl who ran away to fight for ISIS in Syria, or to support the ISIS mission in Syria. And she was made stateless by the Home Secretary at the time. And the implications of that is that prior to this case, you would not be made stateless if you didn't have another passport. Shamima Begum didn't have another passport, but it was presumed that she would be able to reasonably apply for statehood in, I believe it was Bangladesh. And that presumption that there was a reasonable chance she could obtain statehood elsewhere became a new precedent to make someone stateless. And what this does is it sets up a second-class citizenship for anyone, such as perhaps Curtis or myself, who could apply for statehood elsewhere, even if they haven't. It also sets up a whole second class of citizenship for every Jewish person in the UK because they could obtain statehood in Israel. So I think that is quite a pivotal moment in this development of what it means to be Britishness, and has fundamentally create a legal framework for this rhetoric we're seeing today, where people are saying, your Britishness can be called into question at any given moment based on these arbitrary determiners that I feel today.
That's a really good point, because I remember a lot of us when we were talking about Shamima Begum, and obviously a lot of people on the right wing are trying to say, "Oh, you're a terrorist lover." First of all, she was, I mean, our argument, and I believe it's so, she was groomed by terrorists. But also, it's not about how you felt about this particular person. Morals aside, the logistics here is really important to make sure that we don't set this precedent. So much so that even Jacob Rees-Mogg was against it, because he was like, we shouldn't set up this precedent. And now we set that precedent. You're absolutely right. Anything's game now, which is really dangerous. I mean, I've never been to India. I'm half Indian. Never been. Yeah, what's stopping the state turn around and say, well, you could probably get a passport because of your family, so therefore we can make you stateless. And the reason why, because I went to a pro-Palestine rally, for example. It's extremely dangerous. And it's not just the far right and right wing doing it. It's the liberals and the centrists, I think, are facilitating it.
I mean, there, but for the grace of God go I, it should be in the mind of all of these right-wing shock jocks trying to utilize this as the topic of the day. Because, you know, perhaps 20 years from now, if Britain sort of restores a pre-World War II feeling of anti-fascism, they might be beholden to that same sort of relativism that they're trying to levy against left-wing commentators.
100%. Let's go on to our comments, because I know there could be some fantastic comments. I want to see what you guys have said. Let's bring in our producer, Sarah Daly, if you haven't guessed already. Sarah, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, good. Thank you. Really great show. Goodness me. Yeah, like powerful stuff. So yeah, I'm sure people guessed already that it was me because there was a comment you made, Noah.
Gave the game away.
It gave the game away because normally I don't, but Coffee After Socials, I'm like, whoa, this is turned anarchy, just revealing the producer like that.
Too conversational.
And then Michael said, I guess Sarah, when he said about the pre-production vibes. Guys, I'm saying I'm the vibes that's not joking. But yeah, that did make me laugh.
Your position is head of vibes.
Yeah, head of head of vibes, not head of analysis. But
Shut up.
I'm joking. So let's get into the comments then from the start. There was a few people became members. Specs just became a member, thank you. And David just became a member, so thank you so much. Now we can get into the comments. Sorry, I'm so slow. Up. Okay, so I think a lot of people were sharing the same sentiment, in the sense that they were saying, I hope not too many people from Labour move, because it might make the Greens look like Labour 2.0. And Kieran Buckley echoed the same feeling. I feel Greens shouldn't take too many people from Labour, because Reform are taking too many from Tories, and now it just looks like the previous Tory government. Is there a risk that happens? That people just look at the Green Party as a party that is just Labour 2.0 if there are too many Labour MPs that start defecting?
Now, do you want to take this one? Start off with it.
I think maybe not Labour 2.0, but I think there would be a compromisation of what the Green Party is starting to build for themselves, and their image as sort of like a resurgent, progressive wing of the left in the UK. I think definitely.
I think there's two ways of looking at this. On one hand, I know I said I don't think it's a good idea, because that's my personal opinion, but like let's look at the options here. You know, the Green Party's objective is to replace the Labour Party, and that includes getting less left-wing voters over. So, for example, like, of course, for those of us on the left, on the radical left, or even just like vaguely centre-left, like who believe in social democracy, jump ship to the Greens pretty quickly. But there are stubborn people who are staying with the Labour Party who don't consider themselves that left-wing, and may not find the Greens that appealing and want to stick with the party. Potentially could sway these people over if they're thinking, do you know what? They've got some really good Labour MPs jumping ship to the Greens. Maybe I'll follow. But that's one way of looking at it, right? Because at the end of the day, despite the fact that the Greens in a lot of polls have overtaken Labour, they're still only on 21%. Now, when I say only, I'm not downplaying the achievement of the Green Party. What I am saying, though, is you cannot win on 21%. You need to get, crazy that you can win on 30% in first past the post, but they need to get 35%. And that means getting over the rest of the Labour voters. And that might mean bringing in some of Labour MPs. But obviously, the other side is you may lose support, and people might be angry that, yes, they're looking like a sort of a Labour 2.0. So I think maybe taking in one or two MPs over a longer period of time over the next couple of years could work without drawing too much spectacle to it. If you've got getting 10 MPs come over, especially some who aren't that left wing, could be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Edward Sexby was kind of echoing that same thing, that there's no way any of them should. Well, he was actually very, staunch on the fact that he thinks there's no way any of them should be accepted. If they defected in 2024 after voting against the 2-child cap, then maybe, but they don't need to be a dustbin for ex-Labour figures. And I think particularly of how this Labour government has handled itself, I think I think it'll be to the detriment of the Greens, to be honest. And I think it was Noah that said it. We kind of say it like almost every single show, but that Starmer is so increasingly unpopular because of how spineless he is. And I don't think that anyone who's associated or attached to him at this very present moment in time will do themselves any favours. And then there was a really nice comment, just a quick interval. What a handsome pair of friends.
Friend of the show, Kevin Logan in the chat.
Kevin Logan.
Oh, you're very handsome too, Kevin. I don't know if you're still watching, but...
And there was a little interaction in the comments, and it was about, so I think I missed the initial comment. That one's gone. I said they do though. 7 MPs just voted against their own government, and about 90 odd abstained, which is a huge deal. No, and then it was a really respectful conversation. And then Michael said, I don't think abstaining is cool, to be honest. I think it's weak. But yes, the ones who voted against, I'd like to see record on other stuff. And then that one, I hope you guys don't mind. I've put your conversation on blast. And then that one's gone and said, no, abstaining is a massive political stance regarding power within the party. And that's what I wanted to unpack. Like, do you think abstaining from votes within a party says a lot about one's political stance regarding power within that party? Or does it just show, I don't know, just a lack of, I don't know, like a decisiveness on something?
I was going to say as well, in response to Curtis, your previous answer about sort of getting over that 30% mark and trying to develop like a broader coalition, maybe incorporating some Labour MPs. And it's kind of relevant to this here, that my stance is perhaps a bit too hardline idealist, in the sense of, if we disagree with the current structure of the game or the strategy that we're involved in, then we need not play it. So in response to what you were saying, Curtis, like, if we're really critical of this strategic voting duopoly that we found ourselves in, then we really need to avoid playing it, which is why I'm quite concerned about the Greens ever trying to get a coalition government going with Labour or the Lib Dems. And in this instance, I do think, like, how far post-truth are we getting that abstaining is allowed to become this big sort of political display of rejection, when in fact it really is, as the first commenter said it, at its essence, inherently just a sort of a weak passivity.
Agreed.
I think I have to disagree with this comment. I don't think abstaining is a political stance. It is quite literally abstaining. You vote for or against, and I think at the end of the day, look. Part of it could be the fact that, look, I don't want to vote. I don't want to vote you down because I'm scared I might lose the whip. Right? I get that being, say you're a Labour MP for a long, long time, and you don't want to lose the whip of a political party. There is absolutely that factor in it. But given the fact that Keir Starmer has been so authoritarian that he's he's kicking out people who voted against the 2-child benefit cap only for a year later to get rid of the cap anyway, then you kind of have to accept that you're going to be kicked out of the party. I don't think it's a party of compromise anymore. It's a party of a right-wing clique. So basically, everything that accused Jeremy Corbyn's faction of being, which, many criticisms of his leadership of the party in that period. It was a very open party. His first shadow cabinet had people from the left, centre and right. Had Hilary Benn, for God's sakes, who made a separate speech about bombing Syria alongside Jeremy Corbyn. You cannot say that this was a hard left clique, yet the media said so. But in reality, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer and Morgan McSweeney has been that clique. So I think that you ultimately have to say, look, there's only so much capitulation I can give into that. I don't think abstaining is worth it, but I personally think that abstaining is something that you should absolutely never support anyway. You should just be honest about your political beliefs. That's my take on that one.
Agreed. But really interesting interaction, I think, in the comments, and I like that it was very respectful. So
I think worth bearing in mind, it's weird, because maybe I didn't get... I do actually agree with this comment in the sense of, it currently is a massive political stance. Because we found ourselves in this horrible hellhole of a duopoly of whipping centrist parties, but it shouldn't be. The only way to arrive at a point where it isn't is by rejecting the premise that is the game we should engage with.
Yeah, no, that in that way of looking at it, it's absolutely true. I think it was, in a way, I think Zach Plansky said, I've not taken money from the oil industry, and people stood up clapping. It's like, thanks for the clap, but it kind of shows how bad politics is, that you're clapping me for not taking money from the oil industry. Like, yes, we are at a precipice in the Labour Party in politics today, in which abstaining is seen as a big political move when it really shouldn't be.
Precisely.
And just a quick interval until I go to the next question, but it's because Curtis is known for saying the word cuck. We said it on GB News. He said it on GB News on live, and it makes us laugh. And then the comments were kind of like, yeah, new name for the show is Cuck Watch, but when you said it immediately, everyone was like, ah!
We had one of those as well. If you saw recently with Zia Yusuf trying to heavily promote a resurgence of Christianity in the UK.
Yeah.
We had North Star Politics, we call that religious cuckoldry. He's just absolutely trying to become a Christian lapdog there.
Are you talking about our shadow Home Secretary, Zia Yusuf? Do you remember he had that fucking stupid thing underneath him? So funny. So, Hungry Kitty said, in all fairness, Tice was the only one who took Labour's dig at reform on the nose and in jest. The rest looked annoyed. Tice seems like the best sport from reform. I started this because I found it quite funny. I never want to give Tice any compliments, but that did make me laugh.
Well, who's the independent? It was Ayub Khan who said that there's a lot of rubbish under our noses, and obviously the reform MPs underneath it. Sarah Poacher was not happy. You could tell she's the sort of person who's really offended. But Richard Tice sort of took it on the chin. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because Tice spends a lot of time on Twitter, he probably has to get used to it. But Jim Speak said Noah's been absolutely great. There's been a lot of compliments for you, Noah. There was also Coffee After Socialism saying the North Star Politics website's pretty sexy, and then put the websites.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been an absolute ball. If people do fancy having a look at some of my more regular output, head over to North Star Politics on all the platforms. We just dropped an episode this evening that you can watch afterwards if you so fancy, but I appreciate all the warmth.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. And just one more, just to big up Noah and North Star. Someone said, recently discovered North Star and instantly subscribed. Great to see Noah on Turn Left. So lots of love for Noah.
They're calling it the collab of the decade, aren't they?
That's what I heard. Yeah, they are. And then just a quick one. People were just criticising GB News quite a lot. I don't think there's much to say apart from GB News and impartial don't belong in the same sentence. I was laughing throughout that video.
I saw you laughing at that.
It's so
crazy.
Funny. It's so crazy that they're even like, they're not a news channel, but the fact that they call themselves one, I think, is so.
But Ofcom are so pathetic. They have done absolutely nothing about GB News.
And a lot of comments were kind of echoing that. And then just a couple more. Using a big multi-millionaire backed broadcasting channel to complain how cancelled they are. Pathetic. Someone did criticise you, Curtis, slightly, saying that they don't think woke
right, I think I say.
Woke right is going to ever stick. Like, we should just stick to calling them snowflakes. But the irony is that they are so obsessed with identity politics, but then accuse the left of being obsessed with identity
I'll
politics.
make it a thing, I promise. I'll get it there.
Then there was a Zach Polanski hater. Zach Polanski, ... complete and utter joke. Who is funding his existence? Someone said.
I mean, work. Usually, I mean, he's a member of the member of the London Assembly, so that's his job. Of course, he probably has a wage being the Green Party leader.
I think as well with Zach Polanski, I think what people sometimes forget is how important it is to be interesting as a political leader, whether that be like divisive from our perspective, someone like Nigel Farage. Fundamentally, this guy's interesting. Similar with Zach Polanski, fundamentally has an interesting story. We did an interview with him on North Star Politics at the start of the year where he spoke about
a great interview.
Yeah, about his early years working in sort of the Paulo Freire inspired theatre of the oppressed. He is a fundamentally interesting guy, and that will rub some people up the wrong way, but it's necessary to get the headlines. We see people that are boring as watching paint dry, like Ed Davey, consistently fail to take the media limelight. So it is important to have characters like Zach.
And you know what? When people say, "Oh, this particular person's a divisive character," not everyone is divisive. You cannot go into politics and not be divisive. Like, by very nature, politics is divisive. Ed Davey is divisive insofar that if you're just not a liberal Democrat or you're particularly right wing, you're going to hate him for that particular reason. So instead of trying to do what Keir Starmer did, which is to try and appeal to everyone and then end up appealing to no one, lean into the divisiveness. Margaret Thatcher leaned into the divisiveness. Nigel Farage leans into the divisiveness. And Zach Polanski is leaning in. And guess what? It makes him more popular, because if you try and play off both sides hate you. Your supporters have got to really support you. I think we welcome the hatred of people who don't like Zach Polanski. Convincing people is a particular game. We are in that. I mean, this channel's called Turn Left, right? But those that are never going to vote for Zach Polanski, oh no, who cares? It's is what it is, you know?
Yeah, and just 2 more comments, sorry, because we got a £5 donation from William, which is really appreciated. He just said thank you,
William.
But thank you, William. And
Legend.
they're not really Rachel Atwood, always coming through, and said, is Kira Little like, what's MBS?
Mohammed bin Salman.
Oh, on women. Oh God, yeah, it is. It's been a long day on women driving laws. Don't know.
I don't honestly. I don't know what this comment refers to. I don't know if you can shed some light, Noah.
No, I'm at a loss as well. Perhaps we're not as up to date as we should be.
Yeah, maybe we should be. It has been a long day, but appreciate the super chat and comment anyway.
Thank you. But that's it for the comments. Thanks, guys. Great show. So I'm gonna retreat.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for producing. Thank you so much for the comments. And obviously, thank you to everyone who tuned in. I also want to thank Noah for being an excellent guest. Please check out North Star Politics. They're all over Instagram and YouTube. So, Noah, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Curtis. And thank you for the warm reception from the Turn Left family.
Oh, we're a family, guys. I hear that. Again, thank you for all the donations. Of course, you can support us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a Patreon link. We can support us monthly. There's the Coffee or Ko-Fi link where you can give us a one-off donation. And then you can also become a YouTube member for just 99p. You've been watching Normal Ireland Live. We'll be back this Friday at 7:30 p.m. and we'll see you next time.